What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel here. I know it's been quite some time since I have put out a video. I think it's been about 2, maybe 3 months, but we are back. Today we are going to be smoking a pork shoulder. We're going to be making some pulled pork out of this, but that's really not the point of this video. The point of this video is actually a little bit different. Today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be tackling the issue that people say they have with their Camp Chef XXL Pro, which is that it runs about 20 degrees cooler than what the temperature probe is saying. So what we're going to be doing to test that out, and by no means is this going to be scientific at all. I'm not a scientist. I'm just a regular old guy that likes to smoke in his backyard. And so the way that we're going to be testing that out is I do have this ambient temperature probe, which tests, again, just the ambient temperature of what's going on in the air. And so just to kind of make sure that this is reading a good temperature, I'm going to test it out a couple of different ways before we go out to the smoker with it. And so the way that I think I'm going to go ahead and just test this out is first put it in this ice bath and just see how close it is to 32 degrees Fahrenheit, which is, pretty close to what ice water should be. And then we're going to go ahead and put it in the oven too. And I've got the oven set to 250 degrees along with the smoker. That just seems to be a pretty common temperature for smoking. And what I'll do is once the temperature probe gets up to 250 degrees, I'll probably set a timer for 10 minutes and then take a reading after every minute and probably just average that out just to see what exactly it's doing. Obviously, the oven could be off in temperature as well. I've never had this thing like calibrated or anything like that, so it'll be good to see what that's set at. But then, of course, we'll see what the smoker is doing at that temperature as well. So we might be able to kind of gauge what's going on, especially even if like the oven's off by a few degrees. We'll be able to see what's going on with that and maybe get a better idea of whether or not the smoker actually does have an issue with showing a lower temperature than what it's actually saying. All right, so like I said, first test here, it's reading 36.8 and it's been holding pretty steady at that, which I'm imagining is pretty close to what regular ice water should be. And obviously you can see the temperature probe is out. And when I take it out, the temperature should in theory start rising. And so it obviously took about, I don't know, about 15, 20 seconds for it to start bumping up. But as I've kept it out for a little bit longer, you can see it starts bumping up in temperature just because obviously the house is set to about 72 degrees. But we dip it back into the ice water, we should start seeing that dip again. Like so. So I'm pretty confident that this is, going to be reading pretty accurately at this point, but we will test it with the oven just to see what that does. This was one of the kind of like higher rated ones on Amazon. It wasn't too crazy expensive. I think it was like $10 or $15. So I, had low hopes for it, but it seems to be pretty accurate so far. But we'll see what it does in the oven. All right, and so obviously, as you can see there, the oven is set to 250 degrees. So we're going to go ahead and get that probe in there, let it get up to temperature, and then take those readings every about a minute for 10 minutes. All right, so I don't know if there should be any sort of specific placement for this, but I'm just going to let it kind of dangle right in the center there, more or less. And then close this up. And then, of course, as you can see there, the temperature is already rising, but I'm going to let it get up to 250 degrees. And then once that happens, I will go ahead and start notating the temperatures for every minute. All right, so it just hit 250 degrees. I'm going to start a timer now and check the temperature at a minute. All right, so we're at the 1 minute mark. And as you can see there, obviously we're up to 263.3, I'm going to call it. So obviously, 13 degrees over 250 and it's still climbing. So we're going to see what's going to happen with it. But, obviously it seems like the oven isn't as accurate as it should be. So we'll continue to see what happens over the next 10 minutes. All right, so we're about 5 seconds away from our final reading, and I am going to call it there at about 271.5. So two things that could be happening here. Obviously, my oven could be, just running hot, and it is what it is. You can adjust for that. Now, if I know that it's, at this temperature running an average of, 15 degrees over, which I'll calculate that all out in a few moments, then I can adjust it. And instead of setting it for 250, I set it for 235, or just not really worry about it all that much and just set it to 250 and it is what it is. But so obviously, it could be that where my oven just runs too hot, or who knows, maybe this temperature probe isn't all that great. So as I was sitting here and taking these temperatures, I started thinking, well, what if it is just this probe that is off? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn off the oven, and before we get out to the smoker, I'm going to just take this probe out and go right by my thermostat for the house and just see what the temperature it's picking up right there. In theory, it should be the same as what the thermostat is saying, but we'll see. All right, so I did give the probe a little bit of time to go ahead and cool off from the oven itself. I did dip it in the ice bath just to help it cool down a little bit quicker. As you can see there, it's starting to climb back up to the 67 mark while the house is at 72 there, as you can see. So I'm going to probably give this about 10 minutes to go ahead and level out and then just see what it does. All right, so this has had some time to, I guess, acclimate, let's call it. And it's at 69.9 and it's been holding pretty steady there. Whereas again, the thermostat on the Nest is saying that it's 72 degrees in the house. So I'm pretty sure this said that there was about a 1 to 2 degree plus or minus difference. And there you can see it did just jump up to 70.7, but about 1 to 2 degree plus or minus in terms of margin of error. So I'd say that's pretty close. And I'm gonna assume that this is running pretty accurate. So yes, the oven was definitely off. So let's go ahead and get out there and see what that's gonna do. All right, so in this case, that temperature probe, as you can see all the way in the back there, that's the temperature probe itself that's got that protection that the XXL Pro has for it. That's where I'm going to put that temperature probe, making sure that the metal portion of the probe itself isn't touching any of the metal grates. And then we're going to go ahead and get a reading. So again, I'm going to let it get up to temperature and then see what it does. All right, so at first glance, we are looking at likely the rumors being definitely true. So that temperature probe is reading 232.7, whereas the smoker, as you can see there, right over here, is showing 251. We're going to go ahead and start counting the minutes and keeping track of what all the temperatures are and then see what we actually end up with. All right, so that is the first minute there. 246 on the smoker, 232.3 on the probe itself. So it seems like that is definitely true, what they're saying about the temperature difference, but let's go ahead and keep checking. All right, for the second check, 246 on the smoker, 231 on the temperature probe. All right, temperature check 3, we got 228.2 on the probe, 244 on the smoker. All right, check 4, we're showing 229.2, 229.4 on the probe, and we've got 244, 246 on the smoker. All right, check number 5, 248 on the smoker, 231.4 on the probe. All right, check number 6, we're showing 231 again on the probe, 248 on the smoker. All right, this is the 10th and final check. I skipped through the last few with you all just because I think you're getting the gist of it. It seems like it's running obviously pretty consistently. By the way, 231, it seems like it's running pretty consistently. However, it's running consistently about 15, 16 degrees short, somewhere in that neighborhood there. So obviously this does seem to be a real issue that people have been complaining about. All right, so my camera gave out there. I think it's the cold that did it in and the low battery. But so what are some of the final thoughts? The issue obviously seems to be real. I mean, I'm pretty confident that this is telling the right temperature, and it was obviously a lot lower than what it should be, theoretically set to. I did set the smoker to smoke level 1 just because that tends to keep a lot more steady of a temperature, and that clearly was doing its job. I mean, it was sitting at about that 244, 246 mark. It's, again, 21 degrees outside right now. With a wind chill, it's probably even lower. So it's going to probably have a harder time with keeping that temperature up at that 250 mark, 250 mark. But I am, I guess, pretty impressed with how even it is keeping that temperature. It's just 10 minutes. Obviously, that's not a long stretch. And you could probably do this test in a more scientific way, probably stretch it out even further, get better results. Either way, I think that 10-minute stretch was enough to be able to see that the temperature that the smoker is saying that it is not exactly what it's saying that it is. I don't know if this has been addressed any further by Camp Chef. From what the last thing that I've read is that they're saying that everything is operating as normal, which it doesn't seem to be. Now, at the end of the day, what does that mean for you if it's not going to get fixed? All that means for you is if you're looking to keep it set at a target temperature of 250 degrees, set it to 270 degrees. So that should get you to that 250 mark, give or take. And, you'll have to mess around with it a little bit. Get yourself one of these. Like I said, I think it was like $10 or $15. See if it's doing it with yours. If it is doing it with yours, then you'll have a better idea of what exactly you need to set your target temperature to. The other factor that might be also causing issues is I have not cleaned that temperature probe since I got it. It's got that little guard over the top, so if anything does drip down onto it, it should, in theory, obviously just run off to the sides, not ever touch the temperature probe. But it might be good to do a follow-up video at some point after I've cleaned that off and then go from there. So to me, yes, you absolutely should be cleaning that temperature probe, but do most people do it on a regular basis? Probably not. So this is a good test for the average barbecue smoker just to see what exactly it is doing. So what are my final thoughts? Well, I guess I would say yes, it clearly is running at a lower temperature than what it says it's going to be. Not the end of the world. That smoker is still fantastic, and it's put out the best smoked barbecue that I've ever had, at least off of like a pellet smoker. You obviously can't compare it to an offset. An offset's going to do a much better job, but in terms of against other pellet smokers, hands down does the best job I've ever had it. I've got all the numbers here. I'm going to go ahead and put it in an Excel spreadsheet, and we can talk about it a little bit more once I get onto a computer and I can obviously show you the screen of everything on there. But the average temperature on the oven was 266.4. Looking at this, it's probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of about 231-ish, something along those lines. So we'll see once I get it put into the computer and calculate it all out. Now, the other kind of like experiment that you guys aren't going to get to see on camera, of course, but so that's like a partially frozen pork shoulder. I had it in the freezer. It's been sitting there for a bit. I took it out about 2 days ago, and so it didn't completely thaw out. So that's going to be an interesting test to see what that exactly does. But I've seen people that have done that before, and they didn't have any issues. So we'll just have to see what it does. I'm going to be also interested to see how much pellets that thing eats up through the night. So I have the hopper completely full. I'll have to probably set an alarm somewhere later on in the night just to make sure I don't run out of any pellets. I don't want to get into a situation where I have a flame out. I'd rather catch it before that happens. But of course, the app itself will hopefully wake me up if it does run out before I set that alarm. But yeah, with it being as cold as it is, I do expect that to eat up a whole lot more pellets than it normally would. Plus, it's supposed to get into, I think, the low teens, maybe even 9 degrees overnight. So it's going to be interesting to see how much that does go through. So, I'll update you all on that in the morning as well.
Right, so as you can see here, I went ahead and just put all the data into a table here where you can see the temperatures of the oven itself, but more importantly, this is the ambient temperature probe as well as the XXL Pro's internal temperature probe and what the difference is here. So obviously you can see the average came out to be about 15.8 degrees between the difference of the XXL Pro's temperature probe and the ambient temperature probe. The average temperatures, as you can see here, throughout that 10 minutes, the XXL Pro and averaged out to 246.4 degrees, whereas the ambient probe was saying that it was an average of 230.6. So I'm not totally surprised that this didn't even make it up to 250 because again the temperature outside was really cold, so it was gonna be a struggle for the XXL Pro to keep up at that temperature. I'm sure in the spring summertime this is gonna be probably a little bit higher, but then this I would say is probably just going to be, roughly again about 15 degrees difference between the two, regardless of what the temperature outside is. But so, laid out on the table here, you can just kind of get an idea of what we're looking at. The nice thing here is, as you can see, it stayed pretty consistent. The lowest temperature being 244, the highest being 248. So a 4-degree swing in between. That's not bad at all. And as you can see here, on the ambient temperature probes sensor, it's just about the same, about a 4-degree difference, 228 being the lowest and 232 being the highest there.
But yeah, that's all for this part of the video. So thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe. Let me know if you've done a test like this, and let me know what your results were. Remember, if you're just using like that temperature probe that comes with it that you're supposed to probe the meat with, there's a difference between ambient sensors and there's a difference between like the meat probe sensors. You want to get yourself an ambient temperature sensor because that's what's going to give you the most accurate ambient temperature. Those meat probes don't do a good job of giving you an ambient temperature, which I thought that was probably what most people were doing, and then getting bad results. But obviously, I've been proven wrong. So Again, thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and let me know what you thought. See you in the next one.